So before we get too far into this video, I do want to say that this video may come across as a little controversial towards people who are comic book fans. And the reason why is because we're not going to be talking about every aspect of Doctor Strange. We're going to be leaving out the Civil War. We're going to be leaving out the Infinity Gauntlet. We're pretty much going to leave out everything that takes place after Marvel Premiere issue number 10. And the reason why is because issue number 10 is when he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme, and that's when he pretty much becomes a character in a lot of the major storylines. And I don't want to sound redundant. I don't want to go over Doctor Strange's role in the Infinity Gauntlet in this video, and then go over his role in the Infinity Gauntlet again when we get around to talking about the Infinity Gauntlet. The same thing for the Civil War. So please bear with me on this. I apologize if it really wasn't what you were hoping for, but I think that once it comes around to us discussing the Civil War and the Infinity Gauntlet, I think you'll be satisfied with our explanation on his character and his role in those events. So Doctor Strange first appears in Strange Tales issue number 110, and as soon as he's introduced, he actually takes a step away from the status quo that had been created by Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Roy Thomas and other creators in Marvel Comics. And what I mean by that is, when you look at other individuals, let's say characters and teams, we'll take the Fantastic Four, the first major superhero team that Marvel ever had, and we'll also use Spider-Man and Captain America. When you look at these individuals and teams, you see that for the most part, their origin stories are told within the first issue of their introduction. With Fantastic Four, issue number 1, we learn that the Fantastic Four gained their powers because they were exposed to cosmic radiation, and this is explained in Fantastic Four, Volume 1, issue number 1. With Amazing Fantasy, issue number 15, we learn that Peter Parker is bitten by a radioactive spider and becomes Spider-Man. And in Captain America Comics, issue number 1, we learn that Steve Rogers becomes Captain America after he is given the super soldier formula during Project Rebirth by Abraham Erskine. So with Doctor Strange, this doesn't happen. We're not given Doctor Strange's origins right off the bat. In fact, Doctor Strange appears in Strange Tales issues number 110, 111, and then issue number 14, and then it's not until issue number 15 that we're given the backstory of the character. Now, with issues number 110, 11, and 114, we are introduced to some characters that become relatively important, one of which is actually very important when we learn the backstory of the characters, and those villains are Nightmare and Baron Mordo. Now, Nightmare, I say, is not necessarily as important with regards to the origin stories of Doctor Strange as Mordo, but Nightmare does become one of the most enduring foes of Doctor Strange throughout the publication history of the character. Now, Baron Mordo is important to the origin of Doctor Strange, and the reason why is because in issue number 15, when we're given the origin story, what we learn is that Doctor Strange approaches an individual known as the Ancient One in some part of Asia. I believe it's actually in Tibet, and he's pursuing the powers of the Ancient One, who will be able to hopefully grant him the ability to reuse his hands again to become a neurosurgeon. And at this point, the Ancient One really kind of reads the mind of Doctor Strange, or I guess at this point of Stephen Strange, and we go on a journey into his past. And what we learn is that Stephen Strange was a very arrogant individual who really cared nothing about charity or compassion and was really only concerned with his reputation and making large sums of money. Eventually, he's involved in a car wreck, and as a result of this car wreck, his bones are broken in his hands, and he can no longer practice medicine until his hands are healed to their previous state, which, without any kind of what he perceives to be magical power, this simply just will not happen on their own or by any conventional means of surgery or medicine in the Marvel Comics. We ultimately see that the Ancient One refuses to assist Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange, due to the fact that he is arrogant because of his past and who the Ancient One perceives him to be at this point in time. Now, the reason why Baron Mordo becomes important is because we see that Doctor Strange, as he is leaving, comes across Baron Mordo, who is conjuring up some sorcery and invoking the name of someone named Dormammu. Now, at this point, we don't know who Dormammu is, but Dormammu is actually the most dangerous foe that Doctor Strange faces. And I think that Doctor Strange even goes as far as to say that if Dormammu were brought into our dimension at full power, there would really not be anyone that could stop him. But what we see is that Baron Mordo realizes that Doctor Strange is effectively spying on him, and he casts a spell that keeps Doctor Strange from being able to speak about what he has seen. Now, Baron Mordo approaches the Ancient One and converses with him, and Doctor Strange appears as well. However, Doctor Strange is unable to tell the Ancient One what he has seen and heard. Baron Mordo leaves, and the Ancient One releases the spell that Baron Mordo had put on Doctor Strange. At this point, the Ancient One tells Doctor Strange that he has passed the test, that his desire to tell the Ancient One what was going on in the face of possible death demonstrated the fact that in the end he is a truly good person. And at this point we see that Doctor Strange becomes a pupil of the Ancient One and is trained in both physical combat and in various forms of the mystic arts. Now ultimately we see that the Strange Tales comics come to an end with issue number 168, and we see that they are switched over to the Doctor Strange comics. And that's why if you were to look up Doctor Strange Volume 1, you would see that most likely it would be Doctor Strange Volume 1, issue number 169. And the reason for this is because Marvel kept the numerical order of the Strange Tale comics going even after even after the comics have been switched over to Doctor Strange. So Volume 1 only runs for about 15 issues. It's not a hugely popular comic. And over the course of these 15 issues, we really kind of get a reboot of the character in terms of his origin story, although I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a reboot. That might be a wrong phrase. It's really kind of a refresh. But over the course of this 15-issue series, we're also reintroduced to some of the villains that we saw during Strange Tales. Nightmare, Dormammu, individuals like that. But due to the fact that it was not a wildly popular character, we see Volume 1 coming to a close with issue number 15, and we see him pick back up again in Marvel Premiere issue number 3 and running to issue number 14. Now, the Marvel Premiere comics were a quarterly issue of comics, and what we saw here was Doctor Strange reappearing in such a way that he had been elevated from simply a sorcerer to becoming the Sorcerer Supreme of the Marvel Universe. And what this means is that in Marvel Premiere issue number 10, we see that a demon from an alternate dimension or another dimension that had previously existed on Earth but had been banished from our dimension was trying to bring himself back into our dimension by way of passing through the mind of the Ancient One. Now this demon was a demon named Shuma-Gorath, and he was an extremely powerful demon in the world of Marvel Comics. Now we eventually see that Doctor Strange is able to stop the efforts of Shuma-Gorath from getting into our dimension, although it's done so at the cost of him having to kill the Ancient One. And this is when he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. So unlike characters like Magneto or Spider-Man or even Wolverine, the powers of Doctor Strange are not abilities that are inherent to him, meaning that his abilities can be taken away. And the reason why is because the powers that he uses, the effects that he creates with those powers, are derived from extra-dimensional beings. Doctor Strange has a multitude of artifacts and a multitude of spells that have been given to him due to the knowledge that has been given to him either by training from the Ancient One or by direct interaction with extra-dimensional beings. Now, who these beings are range. There are, of course, the Octessants, which we talked about during our discussion on the Juggernaut, and these are a group of extra-dimensional demons who came together for the purpose of determining which one of them was strongest. But each of them has various powers and various abilities. Of course, the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak are just one of the aspects of the powers that Doctor Strange has. The Vishanti, where he receives a brunt of his abilities, come from a book called the Book of Vishanti, which really kind of contains a majority of the spells that he uses. And as we progress through the future of this YouTube channel, and we progress through future videos where we talk about these Secret Wars and the Secret Invasion and the Civil War and the Infinity Gauntlet, and we begin to get into discussions where understanding of what goes on is contingent on your knowledge of videos like this, we will begin to talk about how the Vishanti in the later volumes of Doctor Strange took his powers away because he refused to fight on their behalf. We'll talk about how there was a vast difference between the powers that Doctor Strange had during the Infinity Gauntlet storyline and the powers that he had during the Civil War storyline, how over time Marvel has depowered the character. But for the most part, in the early versions of Doctor Strange's publication history, there really wasn't a limit to the things that he could do. He was described by many including Eternity, who of course was first appeared during the Strange Tales comics, and the Living Tribunal, who would first appear during the Strange Tales comics. These individuals had identified Doctor Strange as being one of the foremost powerful members of the Marvel community, and this continues to be the case to this day. Despite the fact that he has been depowered to a degree, he is still very capable of going toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful entities, both in extra dimensions and within our dimension in the Marvel Universe. And it's for this reason that Doctor Strange, despite being a supporting character in Marvel Comics, is still a very formidable character and a very powerful ally, because despite the fact that his powers have been decreased, he is still extremely strong, and he can still achieve a multitude of effects with his powers. He can teleport, he can read minds, he can lift objects, he has telekinesis, he can project energy blasts, he can manipulate energy for a wide array of different effects, he can time travel, he can look into the future, look into the past, he can see magic taking places in other dimensions, he can pull people into dimensions. There's a lot of different things that he can do with the abilities that have been given to him, and even the ones that I have just listed are really kind of the tip of the iceberg. We could go on for quite some time about the different things that he can do, but suffice it to say, the powers of Doctor Strange put him in a category where it's basically a lot easier to simply say he is a rival for virtually anyone in the Marvel Universe, with the exception of the highest caliber individuals, cosmic entities, Eternity, the Living Tribunal, of course the one above all, and even individuals like Galactus. So for those of us who are familiar with Doctor Strange, after seeing the movie Thor, we knew right off the bat that Doctor Strange was going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just because we had seen the Eye of Agamotto in the Hall of Artifacts, I think what they called it, the Vault or something like that, where you also saw the Infinity Gauntlet. And so it was very exciting. We knew exactly that this character was going to be coming. It was just a matter of what capacity he was going to be appearing in. Was he going to get his own film? Was he going to appear as a member of the Avengers and possibly not have his backstory explained? We didn't really know how this was going to play out, but what we did know is that he is going to be, in some capacity, part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so the question was, how is it going to play out? And with Marvel having come out and said that he is going to appear with his own solo film, I think it's safe to say that the formula for his film will probably follow the same formula that we've seen with Thor and Iron Man and Captain America, where these individuals have appeared and they have their own backstories. For example, with the Incredible Hulk, what was really good about that film was that the entire origin of how Bruce Banner became the Incredible Hulk was explained in the opening sequence, so they didn't have to devote 45 minutes or an hour of the film to explaining how Bruce Banner became the Incredible Hulk. But this is also due to the fact, the reason why that was able to be done was due to the fact that everybody knew who the Incredible Hulk was, and they knew that Bruce Banner had become the Incredible Hulk due to a botched gamma ray experiment. Doctor Strange is not as popular, and so the question becomes, are they going to be able to do his backstory in the opening sequence of the film? Are enough people going to be able to understand it? Because Doctor Strange has been portrayed by various people over time, but it's never been mainstream. When you look at the Incredible Hulk appeared in the TV show with Lou Ferrigno. His name almost escaped me. I feel like I should be slapped for allowing that to happen. We saw him appear with Eric Bana in the film The Hulk, which was a terrible movie, and then we saw him appear with Edward Norton. So we know that the entire backstory of the Incredible Hulk has been explained over and over and over again, and most everybody knows it. But because of the fact that the backstory is not widely known by a lot of people when it comes to Doctor Strange, is Marvel going to be able to do that? Or are we going to see more of a formula like we saw with Captain America and Thor, where over the course of the first 45 minutes, maybe half an hour, the backstory of the character is explained, and then everything else is the main story arc? Are we going to see villains like Dormammu, or are we simply going to stick with Baron Mordo, which seems to be the most likely scenario here? In addition, who's going to play Doctor Strange? To me, there are only 3 people who are really qualified to play the character of Doctor Strange. The first, of course, I think is at least in everybody's list somewhere, and that, of course, is Hugh Laurie, because Hugh Laurie played Gregory House in House MD, the critically acclaimed Fox TV show that was absolutely amazing. I loved that show, and I watched it every Monday when it came on, even when it got towards the end and the show kind of fell off. But I felt like in that TV show, Hugh Laurie was able to portray a character fantastic. He was able to portray himself in a way to where he was a serious individual. He'd crack jokes every once in a while, but when it got down to it, he had it where it counted. And having experience as playing a doctor, I think would really kind of go hand in hand with him playing Doctor Strange. Well, the problem here is that Doctor Strange was portrayed as being a neurosurgeon in flashbacks. And so for a brunt of his publication history, he's not performing surgery on people. He is a magician. He's a sorcerer. And his character exists in the realm of performing feats of magic, which leads me into the next person. The second person that I think would be best qualified for playing Doctor Strange would be Jason Isaacs. And the reason why is because, as far as I'm concerned, if a movie has Jason Isaacs, I will go see it. I don't care what the movie is. The movie could be about Jason Isaacs sitting in a chair and staring at a wall for 2.5 hours, and I will sit in that theater and watch that movie to the bitter end, because Jason Isaacs does everything amazing when it comes to films. He's one of my favorite actors. When you look at movies like The Patriot, he was fantastic in that film in terms of portraying himself as a villain that you hated so much that you relished in the idea of him being stabbed through the throat by Mel Gibson. But when you look at Harry Potter, he has experience playing a character who deals with magic as the father of Draco Malfoy, as Lucius Malfoy. He is an evil bad guy. He is a dark wizard. Now, Doctor Strange himself is not a dark magician. He is not an evil wizard. However, because of the fact that Jason Isaacs has experience playing an individual that has delved into the realm of magic, I feel like he'd be fantastic for this role. But to me, the best person, the absolute best person to play the role of Doctor Strange is Aidan Gillen. And if you guys don't know who that is, he portrays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. And this guy looks exactly like Doctor Strange. He looks spot on him. This guy is the equivalent of Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison. He looks dead on him. I mean, I can't imagine anybody else that could play this role. And watching Adrian Gillen play the character Littlefinger, he's fantastic. In Queer as Folk, he was fantastic. He is a great actor overall. And while I've never really seen him portray a character that uses magic, I really couldn't see it being that far of a stretch for him. I really couldn't see him really struggling to take up the role of Doctor Strange. And in fact, I see him excelling quite well in this role. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. And let me know who you guys think would be a really good actor to play Doctor Strange. I'm kind of curious about that. In any event, I will catch you guys later. Peace.